Hello class. This first video we're going to cover Fanuc robots. This is a Fanuc RJ2 M6i robot arm. It's also the same as an ArcMate 100i robot. They have the same motors, same everything, same gears, all that. It's just the M6i was classified as a material handler, and the ArcMate 100i is a welding robot, hence the name. You have Axis 1, which you can't see the motor in the video, I know, but it's down below. Axis 2, Axis 3, Axis 4, which turns this part right here, Axis 5, Axis 6. They're all servo motors. They all use a Cartesian coordinate system. So when you're in what they call world, all motors move together in sync. What we have here is RM1 and RP1. These are the controls for the robot. One supplies motor power, the other one supplies encoder data. And as you can see over here, there's Axis 1 motor. And this F number on the back identifies the robot. This is what Fanuc goes off of if they ever ask you what robot model you have. This F number is like everything to them. It's like their serial number. This is what Fanuc calls their I cabinet. We'll go over a B cabinet later, but the I cabinet has two individual pieces, where a B cabinet is all one. You have your ops box, which is on top there, has your on-off button, your remote, your local switch, your cycle start, so forth, and fault reset. The cycle start only works if the robot is in local. Local means local, it's a robot only. When it's in remote, then it works remotely. It can be started by start boxes and so forth, PLC, all that. When we look inside this cabinet, that's your ops panel board. Your main board feeds into it through those cables right there, these here. There are no fuses on an RJ2 board, ops panel board. And those bottom ones there, this is your emergency in, this is your fence circuit, and this is your servo on for being able to turn it on remotely. We jumper it out so we can turn it on at the robot controller. Those that are on top are for alternate I/O cards. Now, we do get 24 volt off of this board right here. It will supply 24 volt if you need it to your Model A I/O setup. Obviously there's your 480 disconnect for power to it. On the front here, it shows the fault, the remote, and the battery alarm. Your teach pendant also plugs in the front of this, and you have an e-stop, and then obviously your on-off, and then your hours, how many hours are on the machine. And those are total hours, they aren't run hours. Inside, we have the Model A setup for the I/O. You have your analog input right here, and then AO is your analog output. So they have 3 input cards, 1 output card, and these are the controls for it. This one supplies power to it. This is a communication with it to the main board. Which plugs into your ops board right here and feeds down into your main board. Now down below, we have our servo amp, which is this right here, which controls all the axis motors. We have our main CPU. We have a power supply board. And if need be, you can put a process I/O board in over here, which we'll cover here shortly. This is called your backplane. Our boards plug into the backplane board in the back of this. And on the far side, which we cannot see, is an e-stop board. Your cables, your RP1 and RM1, plug into your amplifier. Your ops board plugs in down here, same silver plug, same connectors. And then your servo amp also plugs into your main board. And then this cable runs to the e-stop board. This here has 230 volts coming into it and supplies your 24 volt throughout the system, which I think it has 15 volt on the amplifier as well. This 480 volt that comes in goes into a transformer, a step down transformer in the back of this cabinet that steps it down to 220 volt 3-phase. This power supply here is the number you go off of. This H number here, H105, is for an ArcMate 100i or an M6i. This M6i has been converted to an ArcMate 100i for welding. Now what we have here is an external access cabinet that plugs into the main CPU on the I cabinet. At the very bottom here is the identification number for this cabinet. And inside, this your battery box takes 4 D-cell batteries to maintain encoder data, and you have 2 more servo amplifiers. Now these are individual. They'll control 1 motor each. Some control up to 2 motors. These particular ones are just singles. They have the part number right here. And then this particular model is a 12.5 amp. This one appears to be a 2.2 amp, which is odd. These here, a 12.5 amp controls a sizable motor. Now, depending on how they had this set up, this motor would have rotated fixture. This one could only rotate a small fixture. External access setups are usually used for turntables they'll have an 8-foot span between them with the motor hooked to a gearbox that flips over a table. Now what we have here is our Model A setup. It's your main control for it. This is the back plane. You can see the part number on it. All the part numbers are on the side. And again, this is the main control unit. Each one just plugs in each side. Or it's supposed to. It always helps when you put it on the right side, the side that's marked interface. It's your I/O card. Again, there's part number for it. Another output card. It's your input card. Each one just hooks in place and snaps in, like so. Each one always comes with a ground cable, because you want everything to be grounded. Fanucs do not like not to be grounded. There are still a lot of these Model A units out there because they still use them on even the newer systems. This is your main CPU board. You can see the daughter boards here. This is your FROM, which is the main control board. It holds all the software. Then you have 3 access cards right here, these 3. These control all the motors, communication for the motors. And then these 2 are memory cards. One's RAM, the other one's memory. This board, well, back to this board, if you look, it says main CPU on it. And then right there in the front, it says amp and robot. The amp plugs into this side plugs into the e-stop board where it says robot. And then your JD1A is for your I/O setup. That's where your I/O plugs in. It says I/O master. Up here is your part number for this board. I don't know how well you can read it. It's A16B 3200 004. And then I'll have a revision number after it. This is our external access control. For this particular one, only has 1 card, but it has the ability to run quite a few motors, external access motors. You see the amp at the top, encoder at the bottom. This is your power supply board that's in there. You can see it says PSU. and it has a main fuse that goes right here. Your 250 volt plugs into here, and then you have two more connections, CP2 and CP3, and then you have an alarm light that you'll see if one of these fuses down here gets blown, and then you have a main control power. Hope you was able to see that. On this particular one, it says battery. On a lot of the RJ2s, you can slip the battery in here, and it would plug in right here. It's the same way with the main board. The main board at the top, the battery plugs in right there. So if you ever have to pull this main board, you would have the machine on, you would take the battery off the power supply board and plug it into the main board, and then shut the machine off to pull the main board out. This is a processed I/O board. You have CRM2B here, which controls inputs and outputs, and you have CMR2A here, which is for all the service programs, service inputs and outputs, like your auto start, home, and things like that. CRW1 is where your welder would plug in. This particular process I/O board is for a welding unit, but they can be used for either or. They can be used for material handler or for welding. Typically the material handler boards do not have these plugs. This plug is rarely used. It's for a second welder. Most systems you see out there will only have one welder. And then your plug plugs into here. This is a Model B I/O card. It would plug into JD4B right here if you needed to add this type of I/O card, and then it would plug into 1A here. This has a fuse on it, 2 amp fuse, just like this I/O card does. This I/O card gets a 2 amp fuse right here. Now, I picked this particular one so you could see what happens when you wire them wrong. That particular chip took quite a voltage hit. It melted it and blew it apart. These chips right here control your outputs. They are solely for outputs. Right here is a spare chip that you would have. So if you do happen to blow one of these, you have a spare on there. But typically on this type of damage, if you look real close down here, you can see that trace is burnt. So this board is no good. Because the damage went farther than this. It went into the actual plug unit. I'm only covering the basics with these right now. so you can understand how the unit works. Back here, you have a transformer. That's your step-down transformer that mounts in the back of the eye cabinet. You have 480 that goes into it, and it puts out 220 volt, 3-phase. And then your power supply board steps it down from there. Over here, we have our amplifiers. This is an RJ2 amplifier. This A06B 607 is the part number. H0104 is the part number they use. The main number they want off of it is this H104. That's an identifying number. This is H105. And these are both RJ2 units. You have 2 fuses on these right here. They rarely blow, and usually if they do, the amplifier is just junk. This particular amplifier, this came out of an ArcMate 100i. As you can see, they broke one of the resistors off. This is an RJ3 amplifier. This ROT right here on this plug is robot over travel. This plug here is for your hand broken, for the wrist. If you have a welding gun mounted on the wrist, or sometimes material handling, they'll wire into here, so if the robot ever hits anything, it pulls up a hand broken alarm. On this particular model, they have what you call an FU fuse. It says FU1 right there, and it is an FU fuse. So many people have gotten burned by this fuse. When I first started working on them, it burned me, and it was an FU. I could not find that fuse. They kept telling me to change the 3.2 amp glass fuse, and then I finally found it, and sure enough, that's all it was, is my robot, my hand broken, had shorted out, and it popped that fuse. You also have 2 fuses here, 2 2-amp fuses. Again, they rarely blow. The RJ3, instead of having all the cables, has 1 plug instead of multiple, and it runs off of a fiber optic unit. So you have this plug up here for all your controls, and then you have this fiber optic that plugs into the main board, the main CPU, for control. You do still have a lot of plugs that plug in here for motor control, motor power. And there again is your transformer. So that's the main breakdown of your Fanuc robot. What controls it and how it works. So now I'm going to take and wire the 480 into this. so we can power it up. Now, I run delta power here, and as we know, Y has 273 or 281, something like that, on each leg. Delta reads 480 on L1 and L3, and the center is neutral. So my white is wired for delta, it's wired neutral. So it has to be wired to L2 in the center, or I risk burning up my amplifier. The black and the red don't matter. They just get wired up on L1 and L3. There's my power. Now I hook up my ground. Then I slide my cover on. As we can well see, I'm probably not OSHA compliant here. Plug in my unit. And I get my hum. You probably can't hear it, but my transformer's humming. But now, to verify I actually have power, I can look at my power supply, and I have a green light underneath my battery box on my power supply, which I don't believe you can see. Yes, you can see it. You can see the green light on the power supply. Now this door on the main controller has a switch on it down here, which I have jumped out at the moment. I put a zip tie on it to keep it from faulting out. So I can turn my power on now. You can see my main board here. I've got all 4 green lights on it. That means that it booted up properly. teach pendant here. It says missing process I/O board. It's because we don't have that Model A hooked up presently. So I'm going to press reset. And my contactor pulled in. Now I turn my teach pendant on. I can move my robot. I have to hold down my shift button to do it. This is your on-off your teach pendant. Obviously you got your e-stop. This one shows Arc Tool version 4.3, which is the most common version for RJ2 right now, or is. You can get a 4.4, but even Fanuc doesn't recommend it because you really need expanded memory to run 4.4 software. You have your menus key, which brings up all your options for setting up the robot. Like you have I/O for number 5. Let's see if I can get a better view here. Number 5 shows I/O. And automatically goes to weld I/Os, which we don't have a welder hooked up. So we press, and that glare is killing me, F1 type, we go to digital. And there's our outputs. We hit F3 in out. There's our inputs. Now you go to number 6 on your number 6. We go to number 6, that's our UOP. Which they aren't set up. I should have had them set up. Because that would have showed you the auto input, the home output and input, and so forth. Also in your menu, actually we'll go to select. You press the select button. That's where all your programs are stored. Your edit button will always take you back to where you was before. So we select one of these programs. Let's see, Safe Home. My cursor to Safe Home, I press enter. Now if I was to go into, say, my I/Os again, and then I wanted to go back to my program, I just hit edit. It takes me right back to the last program I was in. Then your data, that's for your weld, where all your weld information is. But it's also covers weld process. You could look at this. Well, that light's killing me. Covers weld process, weave schedules, registers, and position registers. On a material handler, you mainly only have registers, position registers. And you hit previous, clears off your F1 screen, and you hit edit. Takes me back to my program. And you have your function key here, which the number one thing they use for function is abort, which is at the top of the screen. You need to abort your program. And then you've got your hold button that stops it, stop the robot. Forwards, backwards. Your coordinate system, which changes jog frame, world, tool, user, path, joint. Main ones you program in are world, usually, tool, and joint. That's for welding. And then you have your percent keys. Change how fast it moves. And if you hold down your shift button, it'll jump by 50s. And I think that's good for this for right now. There's a lot of things we can cover with this that we need to do in an advanced class. Another thing I'd like to point out is that red light right down there. It has a 0 in it. As long as it has a 0 in it, that means it's good. That means the amplifier is powered up and working. I hope this video helped in helping you be more familiar with your Fanuc robots. Obviously, if you have any questions, just let me know. Email me, and we'll go over this as the next class.